Welcome to everyone who is joining our webinar today. As Kirk said, my name is Tracey Goldthwaite. I'm the Senior Vice President here at the Steely Group. We are a national recruiting and search firm where we match awe-inspiring talent with wicked good opportunities. We have a proven track record of success in recruiting and placing highly qualified professionals in direct hire, contract, and contract-to-hire positions in healthcare, human resources, and the clinical environments. We invite you to learn more about our organization and our core service areas by visiting our website at www.thesteelygroup.com. Our guest speaker today is Nick Wennerstrom. We're so happy to have Nick here with us. Nick is the head of Global Contingent Workforce at a leading technology organization where he serves as, and this is a mouthful, People Analytics Lead and Culture Champion, responsible for developing the Contingent Workforce Program strategy and implementation of new processes and capabilities. His organization is a global leader in providing solutions for services for identifying, tracking, and managing critical assets, people, and transactions. So Nick, welcome. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. Sort of set the stage. You began your career in recruiting well over 14 years ago. Started as a recruiter. You've held ever-increasing larger positions since then. And most recently, you've overseen contingent workforce programs for some very notable corporations, some with annual contingent spend of over $200 million, so some really big contingent workforce programs. So I think you bring a wonderful perspective to our webinar today. And I know you've put together a fantastic presentation, and I look forward to hearing more about that. But before we start, let's talk about big data and HR analytics. It's a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for a long time. In fact, I was doing some prep work for our webinar today, and I read a number of different articles. And one had an interesting quote, and it said that big data has become such a ubiquitous phrase that every function of business now feels compelled to outline how they are going to use it to improve their operations. Like it's that much of a hot button. So clearly we know there is a lot that goes into this topic, but you and I have about 50 minutes to talk today. So I think for the sake of our conversation, we're going to sort of narrow the focus of big data and HR analytics toward talent acquisition and recruitment. So with that said, allow me to kind of cue it over to you. And what is the gospel as it relates to big data?
Well, thanks, Tracy. You know, first of all, I want to thank you and Julie Hannigan for the invitation today. The Steely Group is inching closer, I believe, to being the world leader in employment services. And I've known Julie Hannigan, your CEO, for many, many years. And she is the most honest, forthright woman I've ever met. And she does something that I think a lot of other staffing agencies don't do, which is treat your candidate consultants with dignity, respect, and professionalism. And that alone helps your organization become a force multiplier. So I'm thrilled to be here. The pleasure is mine.
Thank you very, very much. Those are very kind words.
Yeah. So quick disclaimer here. I'll give everyone 7 seconds to read that. So I'm sure that most tuning in today probably thought that I was going to talk about the power of big data and how to harness it to take your contingent labor program to the next level. Not so fast. Catfish. So it's true, Tracy. I think that as a society we are obsessed with big data. Election results, sports stats, dashboards, tenure reports. You know, I think I would challenge your listeners to think about how many times that they've heard, I need more data. This is a data-driven culture. I need some more data from my back pocket. Endless dashboards, tenure reports, sitting unopened in inboxes week after week, no one ever looking at them. Here's one of my favorites. We need to shed light on our dark data. I don't. Where's it been all this time?
Right, hiding.
Yeah. We need to create a data lake. I have one. It's in Ontario. It's beautiful this time of year. And one of my very favorite ones is, let's use linear programming to determine wage elasticity. I just need a third shift machine operator. Can we slow it down a little bit?
Right.
Yeah. So pro tip, though, I will tell everybody, if anybody asks you for more data, they're just prolonging making a decision. So keep that one in your back pocket. But, you know, here today we'll do a deep dive and a halo jump into data so we can help tell a story. So the gospel, you know, it's incredible how much data is stored, mined, massaged, cleansed, and put out there in the contingent labor and talent acquisition space. It's big business, from Tableau to Domo, which are excellent products. But we're measuring everything from turnover, time to fill, cost per hire. And my biggest concern in my professional experience and what I hear from others is that we spend more time mining that data than actually doing anything with it. So particularly in the managed services provider space and contingent labor, data has become sort of its creature within and of itself, where promises on copious amounts of reporting and data being pumped out to clients at speeds that nobody can catch up with. And the biggest concern is we're not necessarily starting with the end in mind in terms of what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish. So the gospel is essentially that we talk about data to the infinite stages, and yet we have all of this data right in front of us, and we either do nothing with it or just ask for more of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyone listening here today, especially those that know me and have worked with me, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Nick, can I ask you a question?
You may.
Does a company need to invest significantly into new technology in order to get the information that's imperative, or can it be found by not having to make that big of an investment?
So I think, you know, a lot of corporations, there's a lot of independent data being stored in different places. And the key is really being able to tie it all together. So you have everything from your ERP to your VMS to your MSP to your CRM, and all of which are independently housing data all under individual licenses. And it's difficult many times, I think, for business stakeholders to try to pull all of that together to make sound human capital decisions.
Got it. So with that in mind, if someone is saying, okay, we're not tracking a ton of data right now, but we'd like to start paying more attention to our data, what parts of the organization then do they need to involve to get all that information pulled together? Yeah,
there's 3 places that you would start: human resources, procurement, and legal.
Okay.
That's your dream team right there.
Okay.
So that's been my personal experience, and it's worked very well. So start there. Helps you create the infrastructure, helps you determine what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish, which tends to be a novel concept when it comes to data, and ultimately streamline the data from all of those different systems into one storyboard, essentially, to help you understand your enterprise A to Z.
Got it. Okay.
So rather than sort of express my concerns about big data and where it's going, or frankly where it isn't, I wanted to share with everybody some very tactical ways to use data that I've personally used. And I think that these are some things that I think can really take your talent acquisition and contingent labor program to the next level. You know, determining the optimal number of suppliers in an MSP answers the single biggest question that any MSP and any procurement function has, which is how many suppliers do I need by spend category, whether it's labor, travel, fleet, et cetera. There's a proprietary formula that I've developed to actually help you determine how many suppliers you actually need, particularly in the contingent labor space. So if anybody wants to give me a call afterwards at the number on your last slide, I can certainly share that with you. No fee whatsoever. Social media analysis. This is an interesting one. So we talk a lot about predictive analytics. And of course, you'll see reams of articles on LinkedIn talking about the importance of predictive analytics. The latest one's prescriptive analytics. And then, of course, artificial intelligence. Everyone talks about why you should why you should engage in that, but no one tells you how to do it.
Right.
Right? And of course, there's some very sound mathematical principles to predictive analytics, including things like regression analysis and stuff that we all covered in grade and high school. But we use social media analysis to predict winning behaviors and predict the success of a supplier before we onboard them. I'm not one to buy a sales pitch. I really want to look at empirical data before adding a supplier, because that is an enormous undertaking for all parties involved, particularly from a legal perspective. So again, it's not something I share publicly, but I can certainly give you some information if you want to touch base with me afterwards on what I do there.
Very good.
Any good MSP obviously sells the following in terms of visibility. I can tell you in my most recent experience, this has become absolutely crucial. You need to know where all of your non-employees are worldwide, enterprise-wide at any corporation. There are particular risks involved with bringing on non-employees, so you need to know not just the who and the where, but I also want to know the why and the how. That's particularly important when it comes to the classification of employees, which I know is a very hot topic with the Department of Labor. The last thing you want to do is bring on somebody who you think is an independent contractor, and then suddenly they want overtime. So I can tell you in my current experience, we have figured that out with laser precision, with the help of the folks and the stakeholders that I talked about, which are human resources, legal, and procurement, especially legal. Yeah.
Got it. And you used a scary term a minute ago, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I think people still hear that term and they think sci-fi, right?
Sure.
And they're not sure what is artificial intelligence and what is it? Well, everyone probably has their own definition of it, but what's its role in big data, HR analytics, and helping us decide who the right talent is to hire?
Sure. So it is certainly the latest buzzword, depending on what sector you select on your LinkedIn profile. Will depend on what news feed you get. I think when we say artificial intelligence, we think of humanoid robots.
Yeah.
Right, which will replace you next year, Tracey. Well, that's what Julie told me anyway. I shouldn't have told you that. But, you know, artificial intelligence is all around us, right?
Yeah.
Red light cameras. If you've ever played a video game against a computer, that's artificial intelligence. Google Jobs was recently released earlier this year. I'm going to use some big words that I don't know the meanings of, but they, now what they've done is they've baked in algorithms, which are essentially recipes or machine learning to teach a program what to do. So Google Jobs, I don't work for Google, by the way, but I think it's amazing. Google Jobs, you cannot, as an employer, post jobs on there, but what it does is it aggregates in a very accurate way. All of the job postings are on the internet using what's called screen scraper software, where you can mine external job postings from corporations' websites, consolidate them into one place, and then job seekers can apply that way. And I think years ago I saw some pretty good algorithms around skill set matching to resumes, but I don't think that artificial intelligence will ever replace the recruiter in its entirety. I think we all like some artificial intelligence when it comes to scheduling and rescheduling interviews, which tends to be the bane of most recruiters. But no, I think that end users and hiring managers still like to call their recruiter whenever they need to, and that personal service and the intuition that both the end user and the recruiter bring forward when interviewing and selecting, no machine can replace that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true, which is interesting because as we talk about data and its role in HR and talent acquisition, I wonder, and maybe you're going to address this in a future slide, so if you are, certainly feel free to say that, but I wonder if sometimes you talked about how you get all this copious amounts of information, right? And that information, if properly digested, might point to you should find your talent here, or you know, the best skill set for someone to be successful in this job is this. But are there times when, in your experience working with that data, you've gotten information that was counterintuitive, that you felt sort of went against exactly what you were just saying, like your gut instinct, right? And that relationship part of the equation?
Yeah. Well, I think if you're using some basic mathematical approaches like mean, median, and mode, if you're using, let's say you want to look at time to fill, for example, you're going to take the average of that time to fill. One or two worker records can entirely throw off that average, but if your end user is only looking at that average time to fill of all the worker records, it can lead you to think that the time to fill is worse than it really is. That's one really concrete example where I've seen data lead you astray.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah. One simple one anyway. So.
Yeah.
Some other good uses for data that I've seen in the talent management and human capital space is obviously time to fill and candidate quality. We want to try to find top talent at the most competitive price. Okay. No one will ever stop doing that. Average placement bill rate. So I would encourage your listeners, if they're part of a contingent labor program, take a look at all of your headcount, your historical headcount. If you have high volume, high distraction positions, let's say that you work for a large pharmaceutical company and you hire copious amounts of pharmacy technicians, take a look at what the average bill rate was in a quarter that the suppliers were placing that worker at, and instead of posting it at the market rate, post it at the average of those bill rates. You'll generate immediate cost savings doing so.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Cost savings is a simple one that's very popular everywhere, which is essentially how much am I saving when I spend. So that's really at the core and paramount to the success of any managed services provider program. Diversity turnover, that should be important to everybody. When you have underrepresented groups leaving an organization at a rate that's higher than other groups, you have a very serious concern on your hands, and you need to act on that quickly. So take a look at your data and find out who's a flight risk and try to address it immediately.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is there, if I can interject for a second, obviously you leverage this data on a regular basis. When you really started looking at data and using it as a tool to make hiring decisions for your contingent workforce programs, have you at any point said to yourself, gosh, I wish we would have started tracking that sooner? Or this data, we just really shouldn't pay a lot of attention to? What would it be?
Well, I think that there are a lot of corporations that don't track their non-employees in a meaningful manner. Where I work today, we have a very sophisticated methodology for bucketing non-employees into 4 different categories. Now with an MSP in place, that is much more robust and much more sophisticated than it ever has been. I think if you look backwards, that was something very easy that could have been done a long time ago. So that's the second part to that.
And is there any data that you just feel shouldn't be a part of the equation, that people are paying too much attention to and they shouldn't, that there's other factors that are more important?
Well, you know, if you work in the MSP space, the 3rd slide of every business review starts with a historical viewpoint of your headcount. Thank you, so what? So, you know, I mean, thank you for telling me that what should be up is down and what should be down is up.
Right.
But ultimately, it elicits the feelings of, so what? And what are you going to do about it? So I think it's important to really understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you're just getting a steady state canned report all the time and you're not really doing anything with it, you probably don't need it.
Got it.
I would encourage, you know, when you're looking at data, I would encourage anybody listening today that if you're not saving your company or making money, stop doing it. And that can come in a variety of forms, whether it's organizational development, total rewards. It's not necessarily sales activity. But if you find yourself doing things that aren't really adding value to your corporation, stop, collaborate, and listen. I'm quoting Vanilla Ice there, and find a way to add greater value to your organization.
Got it. And how often, I'm going to ask you one more question.
Ask on.
How often should you be pulling data? So it goes back to that you can just keep asking for more data. You really have got to act on it. I know you'll talk about how you act on it in a few minutes, but how often should you be pulling that data?
So I think it depends on the organization, within your organization that you support. You know, if it's finance, obviously quarter close is of critical importance. I think conventional wisdom in the contingent labor space has been we pull things quarterly. Today, in our current state where I work, we don't do business reviews. I see no reason to look backwards at all. What does my headcount a year ago do for me?
Is it predictive? Can you find a cycle, a cyclical pattern?
You can, but I think it harkens back to my original question is what am I going to do with it, right? So, again, I would encourage any MSP to get off the steady state and really try to have more governance and strategy meetings and less on this is what we did last quarter, now let's go have lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because at that point, I'm just looking forward to the lunch.
Right.
Yeah. Cost avoidance. So this is an interesting one, and I could challenge anyone to do a deep dive on this one. I'm using a punchline. I promise not to do that. Cost avoidance is how much am I saving by not spending, right? Mm. So I also have another method that I use to illustrate cost avoidance within the program. And again, I can share that with people individually. But again, so cost avoidance would be I shut down a plant in Buffalo Grove, for example. I'm not spending money anymore. That's cost avoidance. Whereas I'm going to continue to book travel. How can I get the most cost-effective airfare? That's cost savings.
Got it.
So those are real-world examples outside of, say, contingent labor or talent acquisition.
Very good.
Yeah. So correlation matrix, so before you ever buy another piece of software, whether it's Tableau or Domo, and I personally own Tableau and I think it's great, see if you can get the most out of Excel first. You can develop an excellent correlation matrix within Excel. And I have found that of all of the conventional measures by which you determine a supplier's success, the two that are most important to me personally is response rate, meaning when a requisition comes out through your vendor management system, are you responding to and submitting at least one candidate? And then placement rate. Those two are most directly correlated. The others are nice to have, and it's important to round out the evaluation process, but you can draw a correlation of success of your existing supply base by looking at those two things. And you can easily make a correlation matrix in Excel by doing that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
You know, pipeline for full-time hiring, I don't always think that people perceive contingent labor to be strategic, because let's be honest, when it's over, it's over, right? When the worker ends, they leave. What's concerning, though, is there's a lot of starting and stopping in conventional talent acquisition departments. And instead of letting that good contingent labor walk out the door never to be seen again, why not find a way to bring them back into the fold to be full-time hires? I mean, you're just letting, your organization becomes a leaky ship after a while of really good talent. And let's be honest, I mean, there's a lot of times where consultants are often more higher skilled than your full-time employees. So why not hold on to them?
So how do you communicate that, and what can an organization do to do that and not let that talent walk out the door and land somewhere else?
So to your question earlier, on a weekly basis, you should be asking your MSP for a list of terms and reason codes. And if you have individuals with a skill set that's critical to your organization and they've left on positive terms, call them back. If your contract allows you to, call them back and consider them for a full-time opening. Again, your talent acquisition department should be evergreen status. You should always be proactively sourcing. You should always be proactively mining. And oftentimes, I think contingent labor is sort of tucked away and it's forgotten about.
Sure.
On a weekly basis, I would be demanding that from your MSP. And who can I convert for free?
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, you mentioned this a little bit ago, but, you know, ethnographic research is something that's, it's a practice and a research methodology that I don't think is really well explored in the human capital management space. And this is really taking a look at the attitudes and the cultural trends, lifestyles, norms of your consumers, which would be your job seekers, and how they feel about your company, the branding, the website. I mean, ultimately, people want to work for organizations that they believe in. I almost call it activist job seeking, really. You want to work for an organization that matches your core beliefs.
Right.
I work for the best company in the world right now. And I was thrilled to work there because their products, services, and solutions touch every aspect of my life. I had to work there. And I think the same could go for anybody else. So talent acquisition departments would be well suited, I think, to do more of this in terms of focus groups and understanding what the job pool out there and available candidate pool thinks of their organization and then tailors their employment branding to that.
So how do they get that data?
Well, don't pay for it. I don't pay for data.
Okay.
You can get, just wait a week and then it'll be posted free on a job aggregator using, or I'm sorry, a news aggregator using artificial intelligence. But you know, I mean, if you were really savvy, you could do focus groups with individuals who are in your applicant tracking system, who maybe you've never touched, to understand what drew them to your organization. So I sit here at the Steely Group, and this is a contemporary office not far away from a metropolitan area. That's the city of Chicago, based in the Prairie State, which is the best state in the country. And who wouldn't want to work here, right? Right. Especially for Julie. So, you know, it's really about, Julie's behind me. Yeah. And it's really about understanding what's drawing people to you. Anybody can offer anyone a job, but does that person really want it is the question. Well,
and I think you bring up focus groups. Like, I don't think that is something that's used very often. I think people love to put a little survey out there, right? A little pulse survey and send that out to people, but yeah. I don't think that they, number one, probably get the response rate that they're looking for. So focus groups, that's an interesting suggestion I haven't heard in a while.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, those pulse surveys, again, to how data can take you down the wrong path. Yeah. One response can sink your entire score. Does that really, on the whole, does that necessarily mean you're doing poorly? No, right. Not at all. And that's the problem sometimes with aggregating data rather than looking at it on an individual record basis.
And maybe for the end of the conversation, because I don't want to hold you up too long, but I'd be curious to know about the data that's being collected in, oh my gosh, the website where Glassdoor.
Yeah.
What?
So that's, so it's funny you say that. We did not prepare this question. My slide earlier speaks to a little bit about Glassdoor. Yeah. Private conversation on that one.
Okay.
But yeah.
But should organizations, I guess, how much attention should they be paying to that?
I think you should pay a lot of attention to it because I'll give you an example. I don't buy a single product without researching someone else's opinion online and then seeing it demonstrated on YouTube.
Right.
And I look for the failures.
Because you can do that easily.
You can, absolutely.
Right.
So unfortunately, I don't take a salesperson's word for it, right? So I think you should, because it's a barometer of, you should do it for two reasons. Number one, it's a barometer of how people feel about your organization. Number two, it's public and it's out there. So it does reflect, good or bad, the sentiment about your organization. Yeah. I would worry about it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
I had to include this because it's ridiculous. It's, you know, you can't have a discussion about big data without talking about Moneyball.
Right.
I'll get to him later, but we talked about this at a former employer of mine back in 2010 about including Moneyball principles in the MSP space. So I love Jonah Hill. I love Moneyball. I think it's very inspiring for any data geeks out there like myself. But again, to your point earlier, this is an excellent meme on how data can lead you astray. Yeah. Take, for example, there's a product out there that measures flight risk of employees. However, if you have one worker in one job title, well, guess what? That flight risk becomes greater just because they're the only variable in that category. So you have to look at things individually. If you aggregated that, somehow your flight risk would look a lot greater than it really is.
Got it.
So it's really about having a command of your data, knowing your data.
Well, and speaking of data, I was reading an interview with a gal who is the head of HR strategy, analytics, and innovation at a very large corporation. I mean, so her whole job, right, is centers around this. And she said that her organization had piloted a big data analytics platform that allows them to gain access to over 1 billion data points from all over the world. Data points associated with compensation metrics, labor pool, supply demand, job descriptions of other companies, where the hubs of talent are, globally and locally, 1 billion. So I ask you, how much data is too much data?
So that sounds really cool.
Right, yeah, right.
I mean, it's a great moniker, right?
Yeah.
But again, I would love to understand, since it's a pilot program, I'd love to know if it was successful or not. You know, how much data is too much data?
Yeah.
Again, I'd love to know what that person was actually trying to accomplish. And I think that's where I'm sort of going with this talk today, is that quotes like that sound really good and everybody wants to mine data.
Yeah.
But like, what are you really trying to do with it? What are you really going to do with it? You know, at the end of the day, oftentimes we want to use science and talent acquisition and contingent labor, and there are some very good uses for it, and I've learned a lot of good things from a lot of good people along the way. But let me ask you, Tracey, when you get feedback from a hiring manager on a candidate, what do they say?
I like him.
Okay.
Or I like her. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a personal gut reaction, not they scored 8 out of 10 on our predictive index test.
Right. There was no slide ruler involved. There was no compass and that other thing with the pencil. No, protractor.
There you go.
Is the one
there
with,
you go.
With the pencil. So,
right.
Yeah, none of those things were used, or an abacus for that matter. But, you know, I think we should never let data replace our human instincts and our human intelligence. And often that, how many senses do we have? 5?
Yeah.
So you never let your 6th sense die.
That's right.
There you go. I wonder why you invited me today. I'm not going to be sensitive. Terrific. You know, to the quote you just had, you know, this is part of the problem with big data. Number one, there's a lot of complacency, and there's a lot of, in fact, by the way, I keep saying big data. Did you know that there's small and medium-sized data, too?
No.
Do you know what it is?
No idea.
Me either. But everyone's talking about it. So,
really?
Yes. There's so much out there.
Yes.
But garbage in, garbage out is one I think we've probably all heard. There's a lot of complacency. Sometimes there's laziness involved, where what you're putting into the system, you're simply trying to check off and move to the next thing. And, you know, I think you had mentioned Debbie Kowalski sitting next to you has very high standards. We need those same types of high standards from our data analysts and the people that are doing the data entry and the input. So this is where the data can lead you astray. And good people can figure it out right away, but unfortunately, they then have to go back and fix it. The last organization I worked for, we had a very robust reporting and analytics team who spent 30% of their time on rework.
Really?
What a waste of time. And part of the problem was is that oftentimes they would pump out information and someone would say, well, it's not telling me what I wanted to. Or no, I'm sorry, yeah. And it's, you know, of course it's not telling you what you wanted to, which leads me to another point here, which is that data is subjective. We turn to data because we think it's objective and that it's cold and it's there. And facts are friendly and the data don't lie. Well, facts aren't always friendly.
Right.
Especially when I buy larger pants. And number two, oftentimes I think we look at data and we say, you know, the way that we pull the data, store the data, develop sources, all of which are very subjective. I had a friend once, and the client came to her and said, I'd like you to prepare some data for me. I'd like you to massage it, cleanse it, and remove all the outliers and then give it to me. That's subjective data, by the way.
Right, that's not actual objective data.
Right, because by the way, the outliers, well, I guess I get to, you know, she gets to decide what those are, which is subjective. And I think ultimately you have to admit that it's okay to be objective with your data. Yeah. The wide focus always leads to a fishing expedition. Oftentimes, copious amounts of data can lead to gotcha management, where people simply want to point out what's wrong with the data set rather than actually taking any action on it. You know, additionally to your quote earlier, that is a wide focus right there. I mean, you have everything from what is it, compensation to how much Chipotle the person eats during the week. I don't know what that's really telling you. Again, I think it sounds great that the person's trying to mine this much data. To the extent that they'll actually be able to use it, I would be surprised. Right. Quite frankly. You know, and too much data does lead to replacing your intuition. And oftentimes I think it can make people feel like they're wrong. Because the data may support one thing, but you strongly believe in doing something different. That's okay to do. Now, I think if you're looking at stock prices, that's important. Sure. I think if you are looking at housing data, that can be important. But again, let's be honest, the sort of ingress and egress of what comes in and out of our American and global economy is simply based on perception more than anything. So, you know, don't let that replace your intuition in any way. You know, and I'm really big on, I like the people business because I don't think we should ever forget what's our most important asset. And that's not cliche. Of all the things I could say, that's what I believe in the most. People are not widgets to me or my organization. We treat everybody the way we want to be treated. And that, again, is with dignity, respect, and professionalism, no matter who you are or what background you come from. And I think the data sometimes can make you think, one of the things that some MSP programs do is they'll want to convert workers from one supplier to another because the rates are lower. Not all of those workers want another employer, and not all of them want 2 W-2s in a year. Right. So you have to think about the people that are involved first, rather than making a business decision that's going to give you short-term results. Right. Yeah. Right. Data with no context focuses on symptoms of the problem. I don't like focusing on symptoms of the problem, right? Give me an example. Well, I'll give you an example, a very good one. Turnover data, for example. There are sometimes canned reasons as to why that we attach to individuals who are leaving, and oftentimes it doesn't give you the deeper dive into why that person left and what their feelings were about their job, the work they were doing in the company, or their feelings of the manager. It just simply says resignation. Well, that does nothing for me. I want to know how I can keep good people for as long as possible. And turnover data with canned responses to it does nothing for me. Also, too, I think arbitrary measures for your MSP program does the same thing. Well, today our time to fill last quarter was up, and now it's down. I'm not going to punish the MSP for that. I just want to understand a little bit more about why that's happening. Right. And I think you have to ask the 5 whys to finally get there. Sure. Yeah. Okay. And the 5 whys? You just keep asking why. Yeah, no, there was no sophistication with that statement whatsoever. Yeah, just. We want to clarify for our audience. You can go to 10 whys if you want. That's not prescriptive by any stretch. Got it. I see our attendee list just cut in half after I said oh. Yeah, this is the problem with big bad data right here. I won't read these to you, but the last one's really my favorite. 50% of all statistics are made up, and this was from a qualified source. She's excellent at putting the right amount of starch in my shirts, but you know, on the outside of her, establishment, there is a sign up that says 50% of all statistics are made up, and it's hysterical because that one could be made up as well. Right. And this is the problem sometimes with statistics and aggregation. You see elections go the wrong way because data tells you one thing, and yet voter sentiment may be the other way. I think we can all think of one big example. So there are plenty of opportunities out there to not look at the aggregate and to be mindful of what's being put in front of you. And how can you, and I'm going to throw this out there, how can you ensure
data quality. We actually had someone just write that question in.
Mm-hmm. This is super simple, by the way.
Yeah.
Take your time when you're doing data entry.
Really?
Yeah, I know it sounds silly, but it's not. I mean, really, I believe in Phil Jackson, former coach of the Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to get back to the basics, right? We don't need to get fancy here with all of this stuff. Data entry clerks, for lack of a better term, please take your time. Please proofread your work and be mindful of what you're putting into the system because it has your name attached to it.
Got it. And we're getting some more questions. Do you want me to throw them to you now or rather wait? We just had another question from the audience, which was, how do you deal with constant requests for multiple cuts of data and the continuous changes?
So whoever that is reading my mind. That is the fulcrum of this entire presentation. How do you deal with it? So this brings me to the takeaway, which is in front of you, which is challenge whoever is asking you to clearly elaborate what their goals are to you. I had a friend of mine once whose client asked them, when am I going to get the predictive analytics? What are you trying to predict should be the response. But again, it becomes an enigma in and of itself, and it's so talked about that people just want to see it. You know, Tracy, just because your car can go to 140 doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And I think that's what's key. I think I've been in the exact situation that the person who asked that question has been in, and what you have to do is take a step back and challenge the requester to say, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Because this is the problem. Mining data is becoming, you have to hire people almost just to create reports in an organization, endless reports that lead to nowhere and then end up in the digital graveyard that people do nothing with. But
somehow they feel a sense of security, right, by knowing this data. If we have this data, we're going to benefit somehow.
I think only because it's marketed that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I love Tableau, but again, that's not really that's a data visualization tool. But now we've evolved from just giving numbers in a pivot table in Excel to these flashy, splashy charts, which is great. And I think using data visualization software can often put an end to the copious amounts of requests for these data points, because I think you can help better tell a story of your organization to whoever that end user is asking that question.
Got it.
Also, too, I want to know why people are asking for the data, right? Again, if it's just for your back pocket, I'm not going to put it in your pocket. I'd like to know that what I'm doing is contributing to the overall organization. So ask that individual not only what is your goal or what's the end game, but does this link to the overall charter?
In your experience, are there specific goals that they should have? Would you be willing to share those? Like, what do you, of all of the different data you've been exposed to and that you look at, which ones do you think, which goals should they have?
From a contingent labor standpoint, and I think you can even take this to talent acquisition, time to fill and on-time fill. Okay. And bill rate management. So are you coming in 5%, for example, less than the maximum bill rate for your supplier submissions? I'm also interested in survey results, but I don't ever think you should have a target for whoever is generating those reports. So Net Promoter Score is a great way to measure end user satisfaction, but why have a target on it? Then you're just working for the report and not actually for any concrete goal.
Got it.
And that's a problem for me personally.
Got it.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that, you know, when you start to ask those questions, you have people more, especially executives, more focused on the quality of the human capital decisions that they're making. You can keep firing data all day, and none of which can actually give anybody an actual framework of where their organization is today. You know, and I think too, I said this earlier, you know, the incessant dashboards, those end up in an inbox, never opened or deleted without reading. Because if you send too much data, people know something else will just come right behind it, so they're not going to and that's a real problem too. Yeah. admit too that you are subjective with your data. Oftentimes I have found when I'm creating data for a customer, that objective data is really just used to confirm subjective beliefs. So, and then by the way, if it doesn't, well then it's bad data.
Right.
Yeah, clearly this is wrong.
Right.
Absolutely.
It didn't tell me what I was hoping it would tell me. Right?
Right. Hope is not a strategy, Tracey.
Yeah.
It's just not. I also think, too, please, please, please eliminate punchlines, including the quote earlier. I think if you're sort of milling around your organization, talking about how to infuse IT metadata into your talent strategy, again, vanilla ice. I think that is a really good headline for a breakout session at a professional conference. If you don't know what that is, stop talking about it. Again, it comes back to starting with the end in mind, which is not my idea, but what are you trying to accomplish? If you're just trying to infuse IT metadata because you heard it somewhere or it was on a LinkedIn feed or you want to expose your dark data,
yeah.
you're creating more work for the people around you than rather focusing on the end goal, which is saving and making your company money. And I wanted to take a moment here to talk about Keep Me Honest. A former leader of mine named Michael C. Reeves, he's a senior program director with TAPFIN. He taught me everything I know about this business. And one of the things that he always used to say that I say to this day is keep me honest. It gives people permission to question you, which is a good thing. Don't take it personally. Nobody likes autocrats. And, he's a wholesome, family-oriented guy from Wisconsin, and he's married. I'm not trying to, sell him to anybody, but he's a great guy. He's a great guy, and he taught me that early on. And to this day, I say that when I'm talking about data, when I'm talking about really anything, because it opens the door to say, you know what, I can keep Nick honest and correct him if I think he's wrong, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, and then we just had, and I think, well, I'll let you wrap up, and then we've got more questions that are coming into our feed here.
Good, good. This is one of my favorite quotes when it comes to data. I was working remote this day when the president was speaking in Springfield, and it really resonated with me. It's not one that I think you see broadcast quite a bit, but I watched him on WGN give this speech, and I really liked it. And I think at the end of the day, what I would challenge everybody to do before you make another request for data or before you field another request for data, challenge everyone around you to think about whether or not you can influence the single greatest variable in your organization. And I would maintain in this space, that's your end user. If you can't, stop, start, and continue.
Got it. I think that's some great advice. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and let everyone know that if you've got a question, please go ahead and feel free to submit that now. We have a couple already in the queue, Nick, so I'm going to start with this one. This is a big one. How can you ensure data quality? And I know you said a few minutes ago, start by making sure it's accurate, right? But beyond that, any other suggestions around data quality?
Sure. So know your data is something that was infused in me very early in my career. If I create a data set, I have somebody else proofread it who I know has knowledge of it.
Okay.
Is the presentation good? Does it make sense? Am I giving that end user 1,000 lines of data for them to figure it out, or have I actually helped provide context? You may have an ERP that's missing locations to a worker, that's missing managers to a worker. Somebody keyed that in to begin with and just simply forgot to do it. So you need to do a regular audit of that data.
Okay.
And where I work today, we do very regular audits to ensure data integrity across the board. So that is truly the best advice, and that's what I've done professionally in my career. I have somebody proofread everything before I ship it out. Very good.
Another question we've received is, how can you create a data-driven culture?
Do you want to, is the question.
So, no.
Yeah, so I think, again, I think what you're trying to do again, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and is data really a part of it? Sometimes data isn't a part of it. I'm going to quote Jerry Brown, the governor of California. You know, he had made a straight quote in saying that not every human problem needs a law. Not every solution needs data either. And I think that if you want a data-driven culture, first of all, look at who your end users are and look at the industry that you're in, okay? I mean, data is absolutely vital to the customers that my company supports, and I can see it in healthcare. When we're talking about positive clinical outcomes, when we're talking about the pharmaceutical industry and whether there are adverse reactions to drugs that are coming out, it's absolutely vital. But again, those can be highly regulated environments where data is crucial because you have to report that out to the public, your shareholders, and the federal government. But again, why do you want a data-driven culture is really the question.
Got it. Okay. All right. Next question in the queue. Do you ever feel that the data suggests a course of action you don't agree with? And how do you handle that?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, you have to have some real courage to stand up to the data because people love data and they love the numbers and they think it doesn't lie. I don't think data lies, it just simply misleads you sometimes because I think, again, we're looking at just the aggregate. There are times where I've looked at turnover data at a particular site and I've thought that we have a very serious problem when in fact we have a very serious problem with, say, the management, or we have a serious problem with the working conditions, when in fact it's none of those two things. You know, if I just look at turnover data and not do exit interviews, I've failed already. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's led me astray in a number of cases.
Okay. Another question is, someone is asking if you can provide examples of how data analytics has given you an advantage in recruitment. And maybe as I read that question, I think back to that quote I shared earlier from the gal who was using the billion different points of data.
Right on.
You know, and I think about an advantage in recruitment, and I automatically think about competing against someone. So thinking about your current employer, do you spend time looking at what your competition is doing? Do you have the ability to analyze their data? Does that affect the decisions that you make?
Yeah.
When it comes to talent? So I'm not sure if that was the intended point of this person, but I'll throw that out there.
Yeah. Well, you know, we all should try not to think about our competition, right?
Right.
So, I'm sorry if you could just condense that for me again.
Yeah, examples of how data analytics has given you an advantage in recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at cost per hire, for example. Now, probably the biggest piece of cost per hire would be a recruiter's salary, but also, too, take a look at where you're finding your candidates. I mean, if your company is a household name and you're generating a lot of traffic simply through your external job board, then do you really need to pay for external job sites to help you?
Got it.
So that's one thing you could take a look at. And that can help reduce your cost to hire by not having these endless licenses or job boards that you don't need.
Got it. All right, and then here's another one. This one's a long one. Can you comment on the appropriate collection and legal use access of company data for global organizations with operations in several other countries?
No, that is a question for your legal team.
Okay. So the answer is play safe and contact your legal department.
Absolutely. Contact a licensed attorney for that one.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And then we just had a request that came over asking if we are going to share today's presentation, and absolutely we will. Anyone who signed up for today's webinar, we will send a follow-up email out to everyone as soon as that information is available and share that presentation with those who participated in our call today. And with that, it's about 12:56, so if we've got time for maybe one more question or a closing comment from you, Nick, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wait, hold on. 1 second, we do. Nick, to capture accurate termination data, do you suggest an exit survey that provides a deep dive into why the individual is leaving, or a high-level short termination reason inputted into a report.
So do away with the, how do you feel about your manager on a scale of 1 to 5? Really?
Right.
I mean, that's like 4 decades plus ago.
Right.
I want you to have an open-ended conversation with your employees who are leaving. I often joke sometimes that the best treatment you get is sometimes always on your last day of work.
Right.
You know, first of all, don't wait until the person's leaving to ask them how they feel about their job. That's number one. And number two, what you really need to do more than anything is ask the questions that maybe you were afraid to ask. Do you like your manager? What could we have done differently for you? Would you like to stay? Why are you leaving? Leave that open-ended and then let that departing employee write down on a form in freehand why they're leaving and what they don't like. Don't ask canned questions. Let it be led by the person that's leaving.
Yeah, you'll get more probably genuine answers that way.
You will get genuine answers, and since it's their last day, they probably won't care if it's anonymous or not.
There you go.
So you want honest feedback from people. People need to stop fearing that they're going to be fired for everything. Yes, if you're not a good steward of company resources and you report representation, absolutely, you'll probably be terminated. But you shouldn't be fearful of your job simply because you're trying to do it better.
Very good. Very good. And then with that, we just put up the last slide here in the presentation. So we've got your contact information in there as well as your email. So if people want to reach out to you, they can go ahead and do that. But Nick, I want to thank you. It's been a fantastic presentation. Really appreciate your expertise and your insight. I think anyone who joined the call today is going to walk away with some very, very useful information.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'll be sad when I leave.
Oh, well, very good. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude today's event. We want to thank you again for attending our webinar. Our next webinar will be held. We're going to take the summer off. We will be back on Thursday, September 21st, same time, same place. Details will be posted to our website and all social media channels as soon as that topic is confirmed. Enjoy the rest of your day, and you may now disconnect your lines.